The world has collapsed, and no one knows how it started. Within days, chaos took over the streets. Amid fear and desperation, people looted and fought to survive as communication and order disappeared. In this scenario, you are the protagonist, and every decision and choice you make will be crucial. At the end of each episode, you will decide the next step, shaping the course of this journey. Which path will you choose? Surviving the collapse. In the big city, Episode 3. An unlikely place. In the previous episodes, we followed Carlos and a small group of residents facing the collapse of the big city. After reinforcing their homes and surviving the first signs of chaos, the group realized the city was lost and decided to leave in search of safety. Along the way, they faced looters, moral dilemmas, and unexpected challenges. The arrival of Vicente, a local survivor, brought both hope and uncertainty, especially when he suggested the existence of a military base. Now the group must decide their next move: trust in the promise of the military base or head to Miguel's country house, an equally risky option. If you missed the previous episodes, I recommend watching them first to understand the dilemmas that brought the group to this point. Chapter 1. The first light of the path. The dawn brought an uncomfortable cold that seemed to penetrate to the bone. The group was gathered near one of the rusted buses at the depot, each adjusting their backpacks and makeshift weapons. The tension was in the air, as thick as the fog that covered the place. "Are you sure this is the right way?" João asked, staring at Vicente, who was kneeling over a worn map, scribbling routes with a pencil stub. Vicente sighed and looked up. "I know what I heard. The military base is to the north, in a remote area. If we find the main road, we can get there before dark. But I'll be honest, we don't know who or what we'll encounter on the way." Carlos observed the group in silence. He could feel the internal conflict of each person. Dona Helena seemed exhausted, but determined. Miguel adjusted his old coat and cast doubtful looks at Vicente. João was tense, but more focused than ever. Carlos then decided to break the silence. "We trust you, Vicente, but we need a backup plan. If we don't find the base, we head to Miguel's house. It's that, or stay here, and we know the city. Won't wait." João nodded. "All right, but we need to keep everyone together. No improvising or individual decisions. The first one who strays puts us all in danger." The group began their walk, with Vicente leading. The initial path seemed too calm, making everyone even more uneasy. The city around them no longer seemed like a populated place, but rather a post-apocalyptic scene. Burned cars, crumbling buildings, and trash scattered in the streets. Dona Helena tripped over a piece of rusty metal and almost fell, but Carlos caught her. "Are you okay?" he asked, concerned. She nodded, breathing heavily. "Just the weight. I'm too old for this, you know." "Old, but strong," Carlos replied with an encouraging smile. As they advanced, they began to hear sounds in the distance. Engines, voices, maybe even muffled gunshots. The group huddled into a narrow alley as João pointed toward the direction of the noise. "We should go around," he suggested. "If it's an armed group, we won't stand a chance." Vicente hesitated. "Going around might take us straight into gang territory. The best option is to cross quickly and hope they don't see us." "Hope isn't a plan," João retorted, dryly. Carlos looked at the two of them and pondered for a moment. He knew each decision carried a huge risk, but he also understood that survival depended on acting fast. "All right, Vicente, we'll cross, but in complete silence. If anyone notices movement, we hide immediately." The group agreed, though reluctantly. Step by step, they crossed an open street, where the sound of engines seemed closer than ever. Carlos gripped the handle of his knife so tightly that his fingers began to hurt. João led with the iron bar raised, ready for any threat. Then CME the first unexpected event. A child, dirty, thin, and apparently alone, appeared running from a side alley, holding something in their hands. The child nearly bumped into Dona Helena, who let out a small scream before covering her mouth. "Hey!" Vicente whispered, trying to reach the child, but they were fast and disappeared into the debris. "Let her go," Carlos murmured, pulling Vicente back. "We don't know who she is or who might be with her." The incident heightened the tension even further. The group continued their path, but now everyone was even more alert. When they finally reached a main road, Vicente stopped abruptly. He pointed to an abandoned gas station ahead. "There, we can grab supplies if there's anything left, but it could also be a trap." João crossed his arms. "What do you think? Is it worth the risk?" Carlos took a deep breath. The decision would be his again. The group looked at him, waiting. Every choice seemed like a leap into the unknown, and he knew the consequences could be fatal. "If it's a trap, we can't be caught off guard," Carlos said finally. "João and I will check it out. The rest of the group stays hidden and only shows up if we give the signal." Vicente nodded, while Dona Helena and Miguel exchanged worried glances. "May God be with us," murmured Dona Helena as João and Carlos began to approach the station. The scene was set, and the next steps of the group would determine the success or failure of their journey. Chapter 2. An Unexpected Find. The group drove down the deserted road, the heavy silence inside the newly found truck. The engine hummed softly, but to the attentive ears of everyone, it sounded like a scream in the void. Every kilometer traveled was a small relief, but also a reminder that danger was never far away. Suddenly, something ahead on the road caught Carlos's attention, who was driving. He slowed down, furrowing his brow. "João, do you see that?" he asked without taking his eyes off the scene. "Yes, looks like bodies," João replied, leaning forward to try to see better. As the truck got closer, everyone inside the vehicle became alert. The road was filled with fallen people, some clearly lifeless, others still moving slowly and painfully. "This isn't good," murmured Vicente from the back seat. He gripped his iron bar tightly. "This could be a trap." Carlos stopped the truck a few meters away. The air felt heavier, charged with fear and uncertainty. "What if they're survivors?" Dona Helena asked, her voice trembling. "We can't just leave them here." "What if they're not?" Vicente shot back. "What if someone's using this to lure us in? We've seen this before." Carlos looked at João, who was sitting next to him. The decision was clear: stop or move on. He took a deep breath and made his choice. "I'll get out," Carlos said, pulling the knife from his pocket. João grabbed his arm. "If you go, I go too. But quickly. We can't risk staying here too long." Carefully, Carlos and João got out of the truck while the rest of the group stayed inside, alert to any signs of danger. As they approached the bodies, the scene became clearer and more horrifying. Men, women, and children were scattered across the road. Some were dead, with bullet wounds and deep cuts. Others were still alive, groaning and whispering pleas for help. A young woman, her face covered in dried blood, tried to get up when she saw the two. "Help," she murmured, before collapsing to her knees. Carlos rushed to her, holding her before she fell to the ground again. "Calm down, we're here. What happened?" She babbled disconnected words, but Carlos managed to understand part of it. "Looters took everything. Killed children." Nearby, João found two small children, scared but alive. One of them was trembling from the cold, while the other held a small piece of dirty cloth as if it were a blanket. "Carlos, there are two kids here," João said, trying to sound calm. Vicente got out of the truck, albeit reluctantly, to help carry the survivors. In total, 4 people were still alive: the wounded woman, the 2 children, and an elderly man who was softly groaning, holding his bloodied arm. "This is going to fill up the truck," Vicente said, looking at the limited space. "It doesn't matter," Carlos replied. "We'll make it work." Carefully, the group arranged the survivors inside the vehicle. The children sat on Dona Helena's lap, who did her best to calm them. The elderly man was placed in the back seat, while the wounded woman lay between Miguel and Vicente. Even the trunk was used, with makeshift blankets to store supplies and make sure everyone fit. When everyone was finally inside, Carlos returned to the driver's seat and looked at the group in the rearview mirror. "We need to leave here before anyone else shows up." As the truck resumed its drive, the wounded woman began to speak with difficulty. "You saved us. Thank you." João in the passenger seat asked cautiously, "Who did this to you? Looters?" She nodded, her eyes closed. "We were heading to the base. They ambushed us. Took everything." "Military base?" asked Vicente, interested. "Yes," replied the elderly man, his voice weak but firm. "My nephew is military. He said the base is working, that they're helping anyone who can make it there." The group exchanged looks. It was the confirmation they needed that the military base wasn't just a rumor, but it also served as a reminder that the road there was far from safe. "You saved our lives," the elderly man continued, looking at Carlos with gratitude. "I don't know how to repay you, but you did the right thing." Carlos simply nodded, his eyes fixed on the road. He knew they had done the right thing, but that didn't lessen the weight of the responsibilities they carried. Danger was everywhere, but now at least they had a clearer goal: reach the military base and try for a new beginning. As the truck moved forward, the shadows of the evening began to stretch across the road. With every kilometer, the military base seemed closer, but the group knew that danger had not been left behind. Chapter 3: The Military Base. Reality and Sacrifice. The sound of the crowd was almost as oppressive as the sight of the base's gates. When the group arrived, they found dozens of people crowded outside, organized in disorderly lines by armed soldiers. Entire families carried backpacks, food bags, and even small children. Some were shouting, begging to be let in, while others remained silent, their eyes full of despair. "This is worse than I imagined," murmured Carlos as he parked the truck a distance away. "There are too many people here. Do you think they'll let us in?" asked Donna Helena, visibly worried. Vicente looked at the crowd and shook his head. "If we get in, it'll be pure luck. Look at this. They clearly don't have space or resources for everyone." Carlos helped Mariana and the other injured people out of the truck. He knew the only chance for the group to get in was through Mariana's brother, Marcos, who was supposedly military at the base. Struggling, they made their way toward the lines, and Carlos began to get the attention of one of the soldiers. "Hey, we need to speak to Sergeant Marcos. He's her brother," Carlos shouted, pointing to Mariana, who was nearly fainting. The soldier hesitated, but upon seeing the woman's debilitated state, he signaled to another soldier. Within minutes, a tall, uniformed man appeared, his face serious and tired. When he saw Mariana, his hardened expression softened. "Mariana!" exclaimed Marcos, rushing to her. He held her as she managed to murmur a few words before collapsing into his arms. "You brought her here?" Marcos asked, looking at Carlos and the rest of the group. "Yes. We found her and the children on the road. They were dying," Carlos replied. Marcos took a deep breath and signaled to the soldiers. "Let them pass. They saved my sister. I'll make sure they're registered." The gates opened for the group, but the hundreds of people outside continued to wait, some shouting in protest, others just watching with envy. As they entered, Carlos noticed that the inside of the base was not as organized as he had expected. People were everywhere, some carrying supply boxes, others resting in makeshift quarters. Despite being protected, the place had a chaotic feel. Marcos led the group to an area where entries were being registered. Soldiers conducted a thorough inspection of the backpacks and questioned the group about their intentions and skills. Despite Marcos's insistence, the other officers seemed hesitant to accept new members. "We're only accepting you because of Sergeant Marcos," said one of the soldiers. "Resources are running low. We can't keep going like this for much longer." That sentence stayed in Carlos's mind as they were led to the temporary quarters. He had imagined the base would be a safe haven, But now he saw that the reality was much more complicated. Later, Marcos explained the situation in more detail. He gave the group a brief tour of the base so they could understand how things worked. "We have resources, but they're running out fast," he began. "We're trying to be sustainable, but it's hard when more people keep arriving every day." Marcos showed them large greenhouses filled with genetically modified vegetables. The plants were visibly different, designed to grow quickly in adverse conditions. Next to them, barns housed pigs, chickens, and sheep, raised to provide meat and eggs. "It's not enough," Marcos continued. "That's why we started producing alternative foods." He took the group to an underground area, where the reality became even more shocking. Large containers were filled with larvae, crickets, and other insects, all in different stages of growth. The sound of industrial fans filled the humid environment. "Insects are nutritious and easy to raise. It's this or starve," Marcos explained bluntly. Dona Helena grimaced but remained silent. Vicente, on the other hand, seemed fascinated by the efficiency of the system. "You're doing the best with what you have," he commented. "We are, but it's not enough," Marcos replied. "And that's why we need more than just production. We need patrols." Marcos took the group to a room where other military personnel were gathered, planning strategic exits. He explained that the base depended on patrols to retrieve medicines, fuel, and other supplies from abandoned cities. Patrols are dangerous. Looters don't forgive, and we often lose people. "But it's either that or we run out of medicine and other essentials," Marcos said. Carlos realized that survival at the base came at a high price. "And the people arriving? Are you thinking of limiting entry?" Marcos hesitated before answering. "We've already tried. But you saw the people outside. How do you look at them and tell them they can't enter?" "It's a decision no one wants to make." João, who had been silent until then, intervened. "But by letting everyone in, you're putting the base at risk." Marcos nodded, tired. "I know. But for now, this is it. Whoever comes in has to contribute. Either you produce food, or you join the patrols. You won't be an exception." That night, the group gathered in the makeshift quarters assigned to them. The space was small, with cots and thin blankets, but at least they were safe. For now. Carlos looked at the others, trying to gauge what each one was thinking. Dona Helena was visibly tired but seemed willing to help in any way she could. João and Vicente, on the other hand, were more inclined to join the patrols, even knowing the risks. "It's not what we expected, but it's better than out there," Carlos said. "We just need to decide how we're going to contribute." "I'll help with food production," said Dona Helena. "I've lived enough, but I won't sit still while you guys risk your lives." João crossed his arms. "I'd rather join the patrols. I know it's dangerous, but we can make a difference by bringing in more supplies," Vicente agreed. "I'm in too. I think it's the only way to ensure this base keeps running." Carlos sighed, feeling the weight of responsibility. He knew that whether inside or outside the base, the fight for survival was far from over. "So that's it," he said, looking at the group. "Tomorrow we start a new phase. We'll do our part, but we also need to stay alert. Something tells me this base has more secrets than we can imagine." Outside, the crowd at the gates still clamored for shelter, while inside the base, the frantic pace of production never stopped. To survive there, Carlos knew they would need more than strength. They would need to adapt. Chapter 4. New beginning at the end of the world time at the military base transformed the group. The daily coexistence and the need to work together united them in ways none of them could have imagined. Carlos, João, Vicente, Dona Helena, and even the survivors they rescued on the road had become more than a group of strangers. They were now an improvised family, forged by chaos and the struggle for survival. Carlos took on a natural leadership role. He organized tasks and strategies within the base, ensuring the group contributed and was respected. Dona Helena found her purpose helping in the kitchen, and taking care of the children who arrived daily. João and Vicente, on the other hand, volunteered for the patrols, exploring the ruins of cities in search of medicines, fuel, and tools, always risking their lives to bring something back. As hard as it was, life inside the base began to take on a kind of routine. Days passed, and signs of change began to emerge on the base's communication radio. The broadcasts, once limited to emergency calls and danger alerts, began to report something unexpected. Peace treaties were being signed between the world's powers. Nations that had once faced each other in a devastating conflict were now starting to retreat. The news was fragmented but consistent. The world was showing signs of improvement. Direct combat had decreased, and the formation of a global resistance had destabilized the governments that started the war. Now, this resistance was taking control in various powers, negotiating the end of armed conflicts. However, alongside the good news came bitter truths. During one transmission, a leader of the resistance explained the cause of the global collapse: a biological and nuclear war fueled by the greed of nations seeking more power and dominance. Carlos and the group listened carefully. The man on the radio detailed how the biological war was designed to target specific populations, while nuclear weapons devastated entire regions, leaving cities uninhabitable and contaminated. The result was a world in ruins, with limited resources and millions of lives lost. They destroyed everything, for power, murmured Donna Helena, her eyes misting. And now the price is ours to pay, responded João, clenching his fists. Carlos remained silent, reflecting. He knew that even with peace treaties and the retreat of conflicts, the damage had already been done. The world would never be the same. The broadcasts also brought guidance for survivors. The resistance called for patience and cooperation. The focus now was on restructuring the world, starting with local communities like the military base where the group was. There were promises of international aid, but everyone knew it would take years, maybe decades, for something resembling normalcy to be achieved. Inside the base, life continued. Scarcity was a daily problem, but the group learned to adapt. The genetically modified vegetable greenhouses kept running. Underground insects had now become part of the menu, and animal husbandry was a valuable source of protein. Despite the challenges, the group found ways to thrive. Mariana and her children recovered, and she began working on caring for the wounded. Vicente and João, despite the constant dangers, excelled in the patrols, bringing important resources back to the base. One night, as the group gathered in their makeshift quarters, Carlos looked around and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Did you notice? He said, breaking the silence. Notice what? Asked Vicente, adjusting a worn-out boot. We made it. No matter what happens out there, we're alive. Together. That's more than a lot of people can say right now, Carlos replied, with a small smile. Donna Helena nodded. It's true. As hard as it is, we still have each other. That's something to be grateful for. Weeks turned into months, and signs of improvement became clearer. Groups of survivors began to organize outside the base, forming small communities. The resistance, now stronger, sent constant messages, guiding people on how to grow food, purify water, and avoid contaminated zones. The world had changed forever, but gradually, a new order began to emerge. It wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges. Groups of looters remained active. Diseases spread in some regions, and the global climate was unstable. Even so, progress was being made. The group, now a family, decided to stay at the base. Despite the difficulties, it was a place where they had found safety and purpose. João and Vicente continued on patrols, but now with more organization and less risk, thanks to the peace negotiations that had reduced conflicts. Carlos, in turn, began leading small rebuilding projects within the base, helping to turn the place into something more sustainable. He knew the road ahead was long, but he also knew that they had made it through the worst part. One morning, as the sun rose behind the mountains, Carlos climbed the base's watchtower to observe the horizon. The sky was clear, a rare sight in recent months. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said João, climbing up beside him. "Yes," Carlos replied without taking his eyes off the horizon. "As much as the world has been destroyed, there's still beauty in it." João smiled. "And hope," Carlos nodded. "Hope, that's all we have now. And maybe that's enough." Down below, Dona Helena was taking care of the children, while Vicente organized a new patrol. Mariana worked in the infirmary, helping to prepare a new batch of makeshift medicines. The world was in ruins, but they had found a way to start over. The chaos that began with the greed of nations was now giving way to something new. It wasn't just survival, it was rebuilding, and together, they were ready to face whatever came. Next, if you enjoyed this story, know that it's not over yet. There are 7 paths available with 4 different endings that can completely change the group's fate, and even the fate of the world. What would have happened if they had followed a different plan? What if they hadn't trusted the military base, or chosen to flee to Miguel's country house? Or what if they had made other crucial decisions in the midst of the chaos? Now it's your turn to explore the possibilities. Relive this journey by choosing different options and discover how different choices lead to surprising endings. Every decision matters and can completely alter the course of the story. Subscribe to the channel to not miss new episodes and alternative endings. Comment here, what would you do differently if you were in this situation? Which path impacted you the most? Which ending did you find the most emotional? Let's build together a world full of choices and possibilities. So which path will you choose now?